Australia, an island, a continent and a country. The sixth biggest country in the world, with the largest coastline on Earth. A landmass of over 7.5 million square kilometres. Australia lies at the bottom of the globe, surrounded by the Pacific, Indian and the Southern Oceans. Isolated beaches border a landscape vast and varied, from coastal beaches to farming plains, to deserts and snow-capped mountain ranges. Australia is divided into states and territories. Its major cities are contrasted by wide open spaces of central Australia. There are major engineering and mining projects underway in the middle of nowhere, and maritime operations exporting Australian products all over the world. This is Big Australia. Over 3,500 kilometres northwest of Sydney, in a remote area in the state of Western Australia, lies one of the biggest industrial shipping operations in the world. Port Hedland. It's home to one of the biggest ports.
Welcome to the world's biggest bulk port. This is the port of Port Hedland.
Port Hedland is the world's largest bulk export port, but in overall port throughput tonnage, we're the 13th largest port in the world.
It's busy, it's big, and it's just non-stop.
Well, this is Port Hedland. It's the world's biggest bulk port. It ships bulk iron ore in these great big bulkers that you see behind us. Because of the sheer volume of iron ore that we ship, we probably have the biggest fleet hanging offshore to be able to load at any one stage.
On any given day, the harbour of Port Hedland facilitates the movement of up to 16 ships. That's 4,000 ship movements a year. It's big, and it's getting bigger.
What we have here at the port is the largest export tonnage port in the world, and certainly the largest in Australia by a fair margin. Last year we exported nearly 247 million tonnes of throughput the port. That equates to 16 operational berths, and certainly a fair bit more under construction at the moment.
With dozens of ships parked out at sea, it's a race to meet a growing demand for iron ore and the world's insatiable appetite for steel.
The demand is driven by international demand, and of course iron ore demand at the moment is significant. 97% of our total throughput is iron ore exports, and that's all been driven by the Asian powerhouse countries.
China's heavily busy to urbanise and also really investing in roads, houses, construction, manufacturing, to actually bring the people out of poverty. And that's really where it's going to. It's the urbanisation of China. That red stuff might not be liquid gold, but I tell you what, the amount of tons we put out, it's definitely liquid red gold.
Whilst ever there's demand, and whilst ever Australian iron ore miners, do things bigger and cheaper and better and have as much iron ore in their backyard as anyone else, the world is literally your market.
Among the product moved are various materials, including salt and manganese, but the main export by far is iron ore. Within a few hours' drive inland are giant open-cut iron ore mines. Rock is blasted, gathered, crushed, and then sent on its way to the rest of the world to be used in steel and transformed into cars, building materials and consumer goods. But how do you get hundreds of millions of tons of rock to the rest of the world? A key link in the supply chain is the port. It all happens here, Port Hedland, the biggest bulk export tonnage port in the world.
We're sending on average about 7 or 8 fully loaded Cape-size ships every day at our current level of 250 million tonnes a year, and that will be close to doubling by the time we reach our inner harbour capacity of 495 million tonnes a year.
To put that in context, the amount of iron ore exported from Port Hedland each year is enough to fill the Melbourne cricket ground at least once a week, every week of the year.
By 2010-11, we'd shipped 200 million tonnes. This last financial year, we shipped nearly 250 million tonnes. And in the coming financial year, 12-13, we expect to ship about 300 million tonnes of iron ore and other commodity traffic.
This lucrative red dirt, iron ore, is delivered by rail or road to the port. Here it is dumped into monstrous stockpiles, then onto conveyor belts to stackers. Next, it is picked up by giant bucket wheels called reclaimers, then onto the conveyor again to meet the ship. Night or day, there are dozens of bulk carrier ships waiting patiently off the shore of Port Hedland, all awaiting their time to berth. Marine pilots like Matt Shirley and Pat Condon are expert mariners whose job is to guide ships through challenging waters. Their knowledge of local waterways is crucial, especially at a port like Port Hedland. Bringing in ships of this size into a port with multiple challenges is a feat for any marine pilot. One mistake here and the port grinds to a standstill. Pat prepares for his next task, to bring in the Chinese bulk carrier the Yanxinhai to be berthed, loaded and sent on its way back to China, all in around 30 hours.
The northwest Australia is renowned for its big tide, so that creates quite a challenge for us. We have some of the biggest ships in the world, we have tight corners, we have narrow channels. Sometimes of the year we have strong winds. When you combine all those things there, it creates a lot of challenges because they're all put together and they're the things we have to deal with at once.
Tugboats are crucial to helping bring vessels in. They'll need to use 4 tugs to bring in the Yanxinhai. Rodney Triplett is the tugmaster of RT Tough. He's already assisted in the departure of the Cape Victory.
We've just released this one and he'll head off out the rest of the way the channel with the pilot on board, and from there he'll head off to China, take about 10 days and turn around and come back again.
His next mission is to work with Pat Condon to bring in the Yanxinhai. Port Hedland is the highest tonnage port in Australia. It sits on the edge of the Indian Ocean in the country's remote northwest. It's the heart of the nation's iron ore export boom. It's a port with a big history. Captain Peter Hedland was one of the first Europeans to explore this isolated area back in 1863. He reported back that the area had great potential for a shipping port.
The port itself has been around since the turn of the century, but essentially rose to prominence from the 1960s when iron ore export was first contemplated and the first berths were set up on the eastern side of the harbour here to start exporting iron ore.
What Captain Hedland failed to point out, there was a huge sandbar blocking the entrance, a massive tidal flow. The area was in the middle of a cyclone region and the river had a very narrow mouth, which made it particularly difficult to navigate in bad weather. Not the most ideal conditions for building one of the world's biggest shipping ports.
It is a significantly challenging port from a mariner's perspective. The channel's quite narrow at its narrowest point, only 183 metres wide. We regularly bring ships in that are 60 metres beam or 60 metres wide themselves. So it is a challenging port.
Unfortunately, you can't pick a port up and move it, so you have to learn to manage it. There's always been some thought about, what is the capacity at the port given those sorts of challenges, the tidal range, the narrowness of the channel, the depth of the channel and all those constraints. But our maritime boys are on a mission to prove something.
The reason we use helicopters is that, one, it's far safer, but mainly because it's quicker to get our pilots on.
Helicopter Bravo Golf Romeo 01 from the harbour helipad. Climb not above 1,000 and track casino. Port Hedland.
It takes 15 minutes to drop a pilot off by helicopter, where it would take well over an hour each way if we had to transport the pilots by launch. The pilot boards 5 miles off the port and then undergoes a briefing with the master and then proceeds inbound.
Okay, Captain, what's your course?
Now course 179.
17.
Engine is slow ahead.
Engine is slow ahead. Okay, thanks, Captain. Come to half ahead, please.
Okay, half ahead.
One of 18 of the Port Authority's elite breed of marine pilots is Pat Condon. It's his task to guide the ships in safely. Today's challenge, to bring in the bulk carrier known as the Yanjin Hai.
The Yanjin Hai is a standard size capey, about 292 metres long, 45 metre beam, and it's about 180,000 tonne.
This might be a standard size ship for the port, but its sheer size and weight is not to be underestimated. This ship is big. And it is just one of the many vessels arriving at the port.
The biggest ship that we have come into the port, 340 metres length overall, 60 metres beam. That equates to over 250,000 tonne of cargo carrying capacity.
Port Hedland pilots, probably some of the very best in the world.
Marine pilotage in Port Hedland is definitely a specialised skill. It is a challenging port. We invest heavily in getting the best pilots and we train them to the highest degree.
A marine officer to get to become a pilot has to get to his class 1, spends 15 odd years at sea, and then he will come and apply for a role here and spend another further 2 years training. And that training is not just theoretical, it's on-the-job training and going through many, many stages before he's a fully qualified pilot to operate in this channel.
And we also provide the best equipment in terms of tugs that there is anywhere in the world.
It's quite a task and a very strong learning task in order to get the guys to know this channel and the ships and everything else that they handle through it.
Certainly a highly specialised career path from a marine perspective, but also highly valued in a port like this.
Okay, Captain. Once we're here, crew stand by, forward and aft. Okay? The tugs will meet us here, 4 tugs.
At the same time as Pat takes control of the Chinese vessel, Tugmaster Rodney Triplett ventures out to make contact by water.
So he's doing 11.9 knots. Our maximum speed is 11.5 knots. We need to get up behind him and catch him to get the line up.
Overseeing the whole operation is the team based in the control tower.
Harbour, good afternoon. These guys are the eyes and the ears of the harbour master in the port. In the control tower, there's many different aspects of the Port Authority, operations, landside, so the marine control tower is part of the marine operations, and up here is the last line, I guess, of defence or communications between the ships. So in traffic management, it's to ensure there's proper traffic separation from the vessels for the safety of the environment, safety of personnel on the ships, and to facilitate the trade through the port.
Helicopter away. Safe voyage. Thank you for visiting Port Hedland.
The operators go through specific training, which is internationally accredited, and in that is a lot of the standard phrasing that you may use on the radio. Obviously a lot of different cultures come through the port with Chinese and Greek and Indonesian crew and that sort of thing, so the cross-cultural sort of language barriers need to be overcome.
We meet all sorts out there. It's quite an interesting job where we get to meet different people from all over the world.
Dealing with foreign crews, there's no room for breakdown in communication.
During birth time, always heaving the line.
Yeah, because the strong.
Must be like the line.
Yeah. The tide's very strong, so you must keep tight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Communication with overseas crews has its own unique challenges, and we have to use our hand signals and face them, and use our lips and sign language or drawings to help us with all those skills. Yeah, it's a challenge there, but it's part of the job.
If the vessel is departing from the plan, inform the pilot.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yes.
Have you any questions, Captain?
No.
No?
Yeah.
You agree with the plan? You believe me?
I believe with the Australian pilot.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good pilots, you think?
Yes.
Good. Master agrees the vessel is ready, yes?
Yes.
Okay, please sign there, I'll take the con.
Pat now has full control of the Chinese vessel.
Stay 156.
We don't have command of the ship, but we have a responsibility to take the con. But the captain remains responsible, and he's got the right to take over from us.
Pat's next task will be to navigate through one of the most challenging ports in the world. He'll need a good operational team behind him, in the control tower, tugboats and on the wharf. And the Chinese captain is putting his faith and his ship in the hands of this expert team. Giants BHP and Fortescue are the major iron ore exporters currently utilising the Port Hedland facilities.
Fortescue as a company, as an iron ore exporter, loaded its first train in April 2008. We shipped our first ship in May 2008, and we've grown from, over that 4 years, from somebody that didn't produce any iron ore to have now produced 57 million tonnes in a single year, and have shipped over 160 million tonnes of iron ore over the 4 years that we've been in operations. The mining operation is actually really unique to Australia. It's the biggest surface mining operation in the world. We bring it onto the market extremely fast.
Getting the iron ore to port is just as complex as shipping it to the world. There are two main methods for transporting the valuable load to port. The first is by rail. The second is by road.
One thing we're very proud of is our rail system. It's the heaviest rail system in the world. It's in the Guinness Book of Records. Our axle loads are 40-ton axle loads at the moment, and we've got projects to look at what we can do to take it up to 42-ton axle loads. So very proud of the rail system we're running, and very proud to actually have the heaviest bulk rail system in the world.
Lawrence Newman is a fitter at Fortescue's train unloading facility.
It's amazing to see the tonnage that we get through the average tonnage, and we're looking at about 107 to 110,000 on a shift. It just blows me away every day I come over here, you know, it's good.
Marine pilot Pat Condon now takes control of the Chinese bulk carrier.
Captain, half ahead, please.
Half ahead.
And this is when the challenge begins. He must navigate the ship through a series of formidable, yet often unseen obstacles.
Enter the channel here. We come down, the tugs will make fast around here. Come into the harbour, we'll stop here and come back to Delta Berth. So that all the tug movements, the most will be down in this area where we've lost all our speed.
The Yanjian Hai is 292 metres long. That's nearly 2 lengths of the MCG, 173 metres long, or almost as long as the Eiffel Tower is high. It is also 45 metres wide.
The vessel comes in through the channel, which is only 180 metres wide at its narrowest point, and the trick comes that you have to angle the ship across the tide, which means that you've only got somewhere in the region of 40 or 45 metres clearance on either side of the channel. So that's quite a tricky manoeuvre, and there's a big sweeping turn as you come into the main entrance of Port Hedland. You have to make sure that the pilot and the ship's crew are fully briefed about the manoeuvre that's about to take place, and under the escort of the tugs, they make that turn and then come into the inner harbour.
If that's not enough to consider, the pilots must take tidal flow and clearance into account.
Steer 157.
157.
The one thing that does infect the port is the swell. Once the swell gets up, it does impact our available draft of the ship. We have what we call a dynamic under-keel clearance system, which works out the physical dimensions of the ship, but also the environmental parameters like swell and wind and tide. The minimum under-keel clearance that we sail ships on, under the worst-case scenario, can be as little as 25 centimetres.
So that's the biggest ship in the world going out with that much clearance to the bottom of the ocean. So very, very challenging.
With these big vessels, you can't afford to make mistakes. This area is considered the powerhouse of Australia's economy.
If we jam up this channel, I think you could probably find that the state and possibly even Australia would go into depression. I mean, that's how important this channel and this port is.
Slow ahead, please.
We're just chasing him down now. He's just come into the channel flat out. He's full speed at the moment is 12 knots. We've only got about 11.5 knots, so we've got all 6,500 horsepower, 3 motors flat out, just trying to hunt him down. The reason they keep their speed up is just the channel's so narrow with the wind, they need to keep the speed up for the steerage. He'll eventually back the revs off and we'll be able to catch him up and put a line up on the line aft.
We're dropping down now at 11 knots and coming down to about 10 knots. Once we're at 10 knots, the tugs can come in and they'll make fast. That involves the crew throwing a messenger line down to the tug crew, and they will tie it onto the big tug line, and the crew will drag that line back up, put it on their winch, and they'll heave the tug line up and put it on the bits. And then the tug's fast, they'll secure it on the tug, and then I've got a tug available to use to pull or to lift or to push.
Basically, we're just going to sneak right up as close as we can, and the crew of the ship are going to pass down a messenger line. We're going to tie that to our messenger line, and then the chief will reel out the big line, and we'll chuck a line up. Coming up the hump point, entering the harbour now. The pilot's going to take the ship all the way into the turning basin, use all 4 tugs to spin her around, and then we're going to steam back up to the berth and put it alongside. For us, we've got to get into position quickly and make the manoeuvre happen right.
So the 4 tugs, one will make fast port shoulder, on the starboard shoulder on the forecastle, right down the back here at hatch 8 and 9, and 1 center lead aft. In case we lose engines, we'll use this one here the most.
If he was to happen to lose steerage or something like that, we become his steerage and control of the ship then. So basically we're just standing by and waiting till we get in, waiting his instructions, and then we'll do the turn, yeah. You have to keep your eye on the ball and stay quite alert all the time. You know, you can some of the tugs going alongside or whatever, you can get caught in the wrong spot at the wrong time, and the interaction of the ship and the tugs can pull you under the counter, and all sorts of things like that you got to think about. They're big vessels, yeah. So a lot of weight involved, so hence we use four big tugs, modern tugs, a lot of horsepower. It takes a lot of effort to turn them around, yeah.
Watched over by the control tower, Marine pilot Pat Condon and the team of tugboat operators have navigated the Yanjin Hai through the mouth of the harbour. But the challenge is not over. The ship must dock at its allocated berth. It's a delicate process. Any damage here could be costly. On a good day, Port Hedland looks as pretty as a picture. It's the Pilbara's largest town, with a population of around 20,000.
In winter, it's beautiful. You get evenings of sort of 20 degrees and your days are 30 degrees like we have today. It's a fantastic climate.
But during cyclone season, it's something else entirely.
Storm crossed the coast at 10 last night, packing winds up to 275 kilometres an hour. In the mining town of Port Hedland, Cyclone George ripped off roofs, mangled fences and pulled down trees and power lines. The region has been declared a natural disaster zone.
Up in the far northwest, it tends to get very, very hot in summer, and you get a lot of cyclones coming through. So the port traditionally plans for 4 or 5 cyclones a year when we would shut down.
And that requires a full evacuation of the port and all the vessels at the anchorage, and that could involve 30 or 40 vessels at anchor, and then the sort of 14 or 15 vessels that we normally have in the port. So it's quite a significant logistics exercise to get all those ports out in a coordinated and safe fashion, and then we then close the port in preparation for the cyclone.
With these cyclones that arrive between November and April, they bring a lot of rain with them, and when you dig holes in the ground a few hundred meters deep, you create massive dams. At the port itself, it closes about 12 to 24 hours before cyclone is due to get all the big ships out, and it opens about 12 to 24 hours after the all clear.
In terms of revenue, a cyclone presents a setback companies must endure. Any delay is costly.
10,000 tonnes an hour, iron ore price about $120 a tonne. That gives you $1.2 million an hour.
Not all the product is brought in by rail. Some miners utilise trucks, dumping at the Port Authority's Utah berth.
The facility receives on average about 200,000 tonnes of ore a week, which equates to 2,000 to 2,200 road trains. It's not just iron ore we export. The material you can see outside the window here, the black material, is manganese. Various grades from low high-grade fines to low and high-grade lump. Each of the trucks has a radio frequency identifier, so approximately 6 kilometres from site, the system will identify the truck to our control room and tell us what trail is coming with what material and to which bunker it's going to deliver. quite small, it'll only receive one trailer at a time. So the road train tips sequentially, trailers 1, 2, 3 and 4. And on top of the hopper is a series of radar and laser sensors, which will position the driver. And when the trailer's in position, a green traffic light will give the driver the instruction to tip his trailer. They don't always get it right. Sometimes it leaves us 20 tons of mess to clean up.
Overseeing the unload is shift manager Daryl Jenkins.
Every day is something different. As you've seen around the site, so a lot of road trains come through, which are inloading the ore, tipping into certain stackers and certain stockpile areas. And when there's enough product on the ground, the vessel will come in, we'll outload it onto the vessel.
From the train's tippers and truck stockpiles, the ore now travels along a network of conveyor belts, with its final destination being the ships at the port.
97% of our exports are iron ore. That involves, for the smaller players, transshipment in by road trains, or for the larger players like BHP and Fortescue's Metals Group, it comes in on a rail system. It then gets unloaded from the rail wagons and stockpiled, and then reclaimed off that stockpile areas and loaded onto a ship via a ship loader. Generally, each ship takes in excess of about 180,000 tonnes, and that process takes about 36 hours to load a ship, and then it departs on the next available high tide.
For Fortescue, the process is continually being refined and engineered for absolute maximum output.
At the port itself, we've got one car dumper at the moment. October, we're getting our second car dumper. December, our third car dumper. We've got 2 stackers at the moment, we're getting a third stacker. We've got 2 reclaimers at the moment, we're getting a third reclaimer. We've got 2 shiploaders at the moment, we're getting a third shiploader. And all of that takes us to that 155 million tonne per annum capacity. To put it in perspective, BHP only did 150 million tonnes per annum a year and a half ago. It took them 40 years to get there. We're going to do it in just over 4 years.
No, that's fine. Fill up to 6 knots, no worries.
Roger, I'll keep an eye on it. We'll probably keep you fast, probably about halfway through.
Pelican Island, Delta, silence, channel 8, radio check. Good morning, we're heading there now. In this stop.
Thank you. Sterling, come out square, lift off half. Sterling. The tugs are doing all the work now. I've got the quarter tug here pushing. You'll see the forward tug on the starboard side. You'll see him moving out now. He'll lift off. And the big tug down aft's dragging our stern around.
With the Yanjin high safely through the mouth of the harbour, the ship must be turned before it can berth. Pat must provide direction to ensure it's a coordinated effort.
Tough. My stern to port on half. Tough.
Stern to port on half. So this is where we're going to swing around quite aggressively, get the power around.
Corona's finished there. His job was basically to slow me down and stop me for the turn. And now I'm preparing him for the starboard side, ready to push into the berth. Tug's fast, thanks, Captain. So we're swung in slack water, so it's relatively easy swing today. The wind, as you can see, has dropped right off, so it was a pretty basic turn. Now all the tugs are stopped and I've got the engine going ahead again. We're going to come off Finnegan Island D-berth and we'll stop again, and then we'll have the tugs push us in nice and gently.
At the adjoining berth, a new system is put to use, considered to have radically changed the way the port operates.
Cavitec is a really innovative mooring system that the Port Hedland Port Authority has embraced. We have a specific need for that type of system at our Utah Point berth because we're limited in the length of the berth that we constructed, and therefore we can get much larger ships on the berth by using a suction mooring system that doesn't rely on the traditional mooring lines.
It's 14 hydraulically powered vacuum units, and currently for the vessel that you see behind me, we've got 9 units attached, approximately with a 50-minute vacuum force, which are all powered by the hydraulic power units you see behind us. It saves us a great deal of time. The vessel can come alongside the berth and be all fast in within 5 minutes, and we can be in a position to load. Conventionally, we'd still be running lines for maybe 45 or 50 minutes longer. It means we can dismiss our pilots earlier and also save time with tugs. Another issue for their use is the safety. We don't operate lines under tension on this berth. With the high tidal range here in Port Hedland, there is a risk that lines will snap under high tension. We don't run this risk and obviously don't put the people on the wharf under risk of being injured by parting lines. The pad itself isn't too large, but the force generated within the seal is certainly significant. I really can't describe to you what I imagine being sucked by 20 tons of vacuum would feel like. Infinitely more powerful than a Dyson.
Meanwhile, the Yanjin Hai approaches the berth.
We're just giving him some weight as he's going ahead, so he can still have propulsion and steerage over his rudder to get the steerage, but we're also trying to slow him down at the same time. Because he's got so big, he's got so much momentum on, it takes a lot to stop him.
The ship's engine room is the powerhouse of these massive bulk carriers.
Dead slow and stern, Captain. Dead slow stern! Dead slow stern!
He's got a set of leads up on shore that he's lining up for his approach. He wants to make sure he's on that line. He needs the speed to get there in the steerage, but he also doesn't want to overshoot the runway because you'll end up on the beach if you go too far.
You can see our bridge marker here, and we come this the red line. So we've got to come down there and get onto that bridge mark.
Push flag.
Sterling, lift off half, Sterling.
Thank you, stop.
Thank
Sterling,
you.
lift off half. Half.
Yeah, Captain. Tough, bear weight, tough.
Tough, bear weight.
Okay, Captain.
Yes.
Ship is all fast.
Yes.
Good ship, Cap. Thank you very much for your assistance.
Okay.
Have a good stay.
Okay, thank you. Good maneuver.
Good maneuver.
Safety first. Yeah.
Safety first, of course. Thank you very much, Captain. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Pat departs the ship, a job well done. But his day's not over. Over the course of his shift, he'll need to bring several more ships in through this challenging harbour.
Thank you.
The Australians, everyone pilot, very good. Every good skill.
Port Hedland, it's not all about exports. To run a port and a region, you have to bring in goods.
The scale of the export activity in Port Hedland and the Pilbara in general means that for every X 100 million tonnes that we put out of the port, we've got to import the basics to keep that industry moving.
So it's not only just the ability to load ships and the ship loaders and all of that, but behind that, don't forget, you're going to have stockyards and reclaimers and stackers, and behind that again, you're going to have trains, rail infrastructure.
We do a lot of imports of fuel, things like ammonium nitrate, project cargo, cement. That equates to about 1 to 2% of our exports come back in imports to service the whole town and the industry that sits behind the whole Pilbara boom that we're having at the moment.
Some of the other huge demands that we're getting are for industrial tourism. The amount of cruise ships that are knocking on the door saying, you know, we have a bunch of people from around the world that want to come and see the world's biggest port at work, and when can you accommodate us? So there's trade knocking on your door, and from our perspective, that's a fantastic thing. It helps bring people into the community, spends money in the community, and shows the integration of the port and the town of Port Hedland.
The loading of iron ore has begun on the Yanjin Hai. In 24 to 36 hours, 180,000 tonnes of ore will be evenly distributed onto the vessel. After it's unloaded from trucks or trains, ore travels hundreds of metres on a conveyor to a ship loader. An operator spends an entire shift loading and balancing the vessel.
We've got the best view in the house. Each of the ships takes about 170 to 250,000 tonnes of iron ore. The iron ore is about 60% iron content. When we look at the Sydney Harbour Bridge, to put this in perspective, the Sydney Harbour Bridge, 50,000 tonnes of steel to build the Sydney Harbour Bridge. When you take the iron content in the iron ore into account, each of these ships takes out between 2.5 and 3 Sydney Harbour Bridges every time it sails out of this port. In Fortescue, we've broken quite a few records over the last year.
We broke the annual record for the financial year of 11-12, which was nearly 246 million tonnes. We broke the monthly record back in May, which was 23.2 million tonnes. And we've recently also broken the largest tonnage on a single tide, which was 1,040,000 tonnes on a single tide, which involved sailing of 6 vessels.
Last week we broke another record. It was the single biggest volume on a single ship going out through our channel, so 248,366 tonnes on a single bulk carrier.
BHP and us sort of play a bit of tug of war around that. We had it, they had it, we want it back, and so that's always a little bit of healthy competition.
When the valuable cargo is loaded, the fully laden Yanjin Hai drops around a massive 9 metres more below the water's surface. And then it's time for the Yanjin Hai to set sail once again. Marine pilot Matt Shirley leads the operation to ensure the fully laden bulk carrier safely leaves the harbour. Under the watchful eye of the tugs and marine pilot, the Yanjin Hai ventures off into the ocean beyond. 2 weeks later, it sits off the coast of China ready for unloading. And then, the whole process starts again.
Once we finish loading the ship and we send analysis over to our customers, we'll get part payment then. Once it's unloaded over in China, they will do samples and confirm that what we've sent them is what we said it is, and the final payment will happen then. So yeah, it's big money. They're not ordinary bolts and checks. Everything is big. It's big money we're spending to get it out there, but also the revenue we're getting from it's big.
Within 5 years, we're going to welcome 2 more major players to the port, and that will involve another 4 or 5 Cape-sized berths opening.
The construction will allow a further anywhere between 200 and 400 million tonnes of iron ore to go out to sea. And when you look at it, you think this is just huge.
The sort of construction we're doing in the Pilbara, it's actually bigger than the Snowy Mountain river scheme. And if you think how that changed Australia and how that kept the economy going, that's really what's happening in the Pilbara at the moment. The Pilbara is really keeping the Australian economy alive. Nothing we do here is small. Everything is big, the ships are big, the equipment is big. Our people are moving mountains every day.
If this is spectacular, then I'd wait a couple of years and come back again.